Fallout New California, perhaps better known by its development name, Project Brazil, is a fan-made game for the Fallout series. Basically, it's a free game that you can download if you own a copy of Fallout New Vegas for your PC. It's an ambitious and rather sizable experience that tries to tell its own story. It doesn't take place in the Mojave Wasteland. Instead, it's an unofficial prequel that takes place 20 years before the events of the base game, in an entirely different location. There's no Caesar's Legion or Brotherhood of Steel. There's not even an Oliver Swanwick.
Yeah! Who won the lottery? I did!
Instead, this story is all about the NCR within the California territory itself, trying to deal with a few persistent raider groups that have united against them. So what does New California do right? Well, the biggest thing that it does is it leans heavily into its role-playing elements, with separate faction quest lines and multiple ways to resolve nearly every quest. Speech checks and skill checks are everywhere, and the choices you make and the things you say can open or close off opportunities later down the line. Two players can have very different experiences, as entire sections of the game can be skipped or even missed depending on your actions or your character's skills.
How are you planning on doing it?
I plan on shooting everything until it stops moving.
The wide variety of paths to take means that there's always new things to find on subsequent playthroughs. I would know as I've played through this mod half a dozen times, and I kept finding new hidden secrets every time. Like that time that my luck skill was so high that somebody tried to attack me and instead spontaneously combusted. While this mod is great with its role-playing elements and branching pathways, it's also not afraid to have some cinematic and action-heavy set pieces to keep things interesting. Many of the character designs are great, complemented by unique armor, weapons, and character models, and the voice acting is top-notch from everyone involved.
He's a good leader in peacetime, but he falls to bits under pressure. I'm worried he's going to do something stupid.
It's also very stable in my experience. Crashes were not frequent, although I did find a few bugs that required console commands to progress. I got stuck in the floor between transition zones, and there was a plot-critical character that was just dead, and I couldn't interact with them. I had to resurrect them so I could continue playing. Small bugs like this were indeed annoying, but they didn't stop me from having a good time with this mod. However, it does have its shortcomings. There is some very lackluster writing, especially near the end. It starts off strong enough, fluctuating between excellent and serviceable, but yeah, it really falls off a cliff. The plot goes into an absurd level of contrivance that is bafflingly ridiculous.
What the hell was this, all that crap about the weird parasite that some... I have to have been mishearing. I have to have been mishearing all of that.
Another big issue is the large and empty world space that has nothing in it. The boring brown hues of the desert can become eye-watering, as moving from place to place becomes an uneventful slog. Although there are towns and settlements and ruins to explore, they're mostly unpopulated, or populated by generic NPCs who have nothing to say. Because of the distinct lack of interesting things to do, most players will just stick to the main faction quest lines. This has the unfortunate knock-on effect of leaving them at a fairly low level. If there's nothing to do, then you can't get experience points and level up, so you won't be able to pass some of the late game's tougher skill checks. So yeah, this mod is a mixed bag. Some people really enjoy it, and some people very much do not. Even though there are some serious problems that detract from the experience, I still believe that this mod is very enjoyable, and that any die-hard Fallout fan should play it at least once if given the opportunity, especially if they're the kind of player that values a branching narrative and role-playing elements. If this sounds like the kind of thing you might be interested in, I suggest taking a break here and playing it yourself, because I'm about to spoil the entire thing and overanalyze the heck out of it. I made a similar video like this about the Fallout Frontier mod, but I wasn't initially planning on doing one for New California. It has been out for a while, the hype has kind of died down, but the more I played it, the more captivated I was by the branching paths, the design choices, and the flaws that make this mod unique, for better or worse. And before I forget, I'd like to bring up the 2 radio stations that are available in this mod. The first one is called Death 98.1, and it plays a lot of hard punk rock songs that I personally do not find very fitting, but might be right up your alley. I prefer the other station, NCR Radio, which reports on the changing status of the NCR's war efforts, and plays the kinds of old-timey folk songs and swing songs that I expect from a Fallout radio station, all of which are performed by the very talented musician Martin Purvis. There are covers of familiar songs like Fly Me to the Moon and Ain't That a Kick in the Head, as well as songs I had never heard before, like Kisses Sweeter Than Wine. That's a really catchy song that I cannot get out of my head.
She had kisses sweeter than wine. She had kisses sweeter than wine.
This guy does some seriously amazing work. He also made a few songs for the radio station in the Fallout Frontier mod, which is how I first heard about him. If you haven't heard his original songs, So Very Far From Home and On the Frontier, you should definitely check them out. This guy deserves a lot more recognition for what he's doing. To start with, Fallout New California begins in Vault 18, one of the experimental bunkers made by the Vault-Tec company we're all familiar with. After opening with a very well-narrated cutscene, you are given the choice of 2 starting classes, Jock or Nerd. This simple choice has a big ripple effect on the rest of the first chapter. Some characters will be much friendlier to you depending on your choice, and most quests are entirely class-dependent. Whichever role you pick, you'll be locked out of quite a few interactions, giving this section a fair bit of replayability. Both classes have their own unique introduction and tutorial. Those who choose the path of the nerd will be injured in a football game and nursed back to partial health by Dr. Rossman, who encourages you to invest heavily in science when building your stats.
Being strong clearly ain't your thing. You should try to focus on intelligence, kid, and quit wasting your talents.
If you instead decide to go the jock route, you will find yourself lavished with praise by the football coach, who insists that you build your character with a heavy emphasis on the typical athlete stats.
I can tell you have a high endurance already, and you have the strength you need to survive in this world. But you're gonna need above average charisma and a damn fine set of combat skills.
Taking their respective advice opens up new opportunities for each class. A jock with high charisma will be given a chance to join Vault Security, a very prestigious honor, which opens up even more opportunities as you progress. You can also use your charisma to charm others around the vault to do things that you might not have the skills for, such as convincing the doctor to hack a terminal for you. Conversely, nerds who invest heavily in science can hack the computers themselves, and in turn, discover even more secrets buried deep within the code. They might also gain exclusive access to a powerful robotic killbot companion that can cover their deficiencies in combat. However, there is nothing stopping you from role-playing as a low-intelligence nerd or low-charisma jock. While it does prevent you from completing a lot of quests, it can be pretty amusing to watch other characters react to such an unimpressive build.
Go on and get out of my office. Do some push-ups, for God's sake.
But these strange and counterintuitive character builds also have their advantages at times, such as playing as a jock with high intelligence. That will open up new opportunities.
Smart jock, huh? Okay.
That's not to say that other skills are completely neglected. There are moments where lockpicking, sneaking, and repair come into play. Speech and intelligence and perception will open new opportunities. But science and charisma are the skills that have the biggest impact on how a player's initial experience will go. Once you've established your character, you are given free reign of Vault 18. The layout is a lot more interesting than the vaults from Fallout 3 or New Vegas, with a large central hub area and a generally more spacious and sleek feeling. A handful of residents are available to talk to, with many of them having unique dialogue for the path you've taken and the skills you've invested in. It's important to note that every single quest here is optional, which is a running theme for the entirety of the mod. Do as much or as little as you want to do, then go to bed and complete the chapter. For the adventurous explorer, there are many secrets to find. The amount of things you can overlook combined with the things you won't be able to do with your current build, gives you a reason to come back and do a second playthrough just to see what you missed. Now, while both the nerd and jock classes are viable, I personally feel like the nerd path could have used a bit more work. While jock players will be able to talk to everyone and learn their respective personalities, a lot of characters will simply refuse to talk to a nerd player, no matter how charismatic they might be. I really feel like it's a missed opportunity for the game to introduce a bunch of interesting characters and then not allow the player to interact with them. Players who choose the nerd class will also suffer from a lack of gameplay variety. There's a lot of terminals for them to sift through, so much so that the first hour of their gameplay could just be reading the terminals and interfacing with the computer. A computer that vomits an excessive amount of unusable information at you if you're not careful. At one point, it starts reciting the Wikipedia article for every Vault-Tec experiment in the Fallout franchise's history.
Vault 7, Henderson, Nevada. A social experiment. Vault 20, Tucson, Arizona. Vault 29, Boulder, Colorado.
Make it stop!
A social experiment. Vault.
Despite my complaints, this whole Vault section is a great introductory chapter and establishes the setting well. Popular sentiment seems to be in agreement that this part is very enjoyable. It's just a shame it's so short. I would have loved to see it developed into a full-on hub area, a place I could spend a few days just settling into my life as a Vault Dweller, developing my relationships and doing simple quests to get attached to them before everything eventually gets upturned. Regardless, after doing as little or as much as you want, you head to bed, go to sleep, and end the chapter. Somebody put dynamite in my alarm clock again. After a very rude awakening, you dust yourself off, only to realize that your family, your brothers and sister, did not survive. Their mangled bodies are intertwined with rubble and overturned stacks of ramen noodles. Outside, you discover the cause of the devastation. The Enclave is attacking. That's right, the Enclave. Remember that computer that was vomiting a bunch of information?
Failure at October 23rd, 2077.
It's still going.
All residents terminated or fled containment.
The Enclave really wants all the information stored on that computer, and they're gonna seize control of the vault to get it. But for some reason, these soldiers are attacking with melee weapons and get cut down pretty quickly. I guess the Enclave didn't have enough guns for everybody. As you head to the main hub area of the vault, an Enclave soldier stops you and presents you with an opportunity to join them. It is at this point that the story diverges once more. If you decline the offer, or fail to meet the requirements to be accepted, your objective will be to defeat the Enclave and save your home. But if you take her up on her offer, you can work with the Enclave instead, and help them conquer the place. If you want to work with the Enclave, you'll need to break into the Overseer's room. There are many ways to gain entry depending on your skill set, which is pretty awesome. Afterward, you participate in the assault on the hydroponics lab. On the other hand, if you're trying to save the vault from the Enclave, you will find yourself on the opposite end of this fight, instead defending the hydroponics lab after sneaking in through a back door. Regardless of whichever side you choose, you end up securing control of the lab. But then you find out that the self-destruct for the vault has been activated, and you need to escape. Personally, I find this to be one of the more interesting parts of the game, as there are several potential companions who can be optionally saved and recruited based on your decisions up to this point. Some characters are exclusive to jocks or nerds, some could already be dead depending on your choices, some of them can't be convinced to follow you if they don't trust you, and even if you do successfully save someone, that person might not be willing to stick around after you've escaped, choosing instead to go their own separate way.
I think I'm going to try and make it to Union City across the desert.
Their presence or absence doesn't really change the story in any significant way. It's mostly just some additional flavor and firepower for the rest of the journey, but I do find moments like this fascinating. Take Jen Hale, for example. Some players will successfully save and recruit her, while other players won't be able to convince her to leave.
What do you want? Please, just leave me alone.
Some will fail to locate her entirely, as I did the first time that I played. Some players will save her, but she won't decide to stick around.
I'm sorry. I just have to go on alone.
Some players will recruit her and then watch her get gunned down by the Enclave.
You like that?
Some will watch her get gunned down by another companion they've recruited.
Jen, no!
And it's also possible for her to get captured and sold into slavery. The fates of a lot of these potential companions are up in the air. You can recruit Johnny or watch him die, or he'll overdose on drugs. Eric can die in your bedroom, as can another character. Alpha can malfunction and turn hostile. The fates of all these characters can vary wildly, which is incredible. It's so well done. However, there are a few problems with how these companions are handled. The ones that decide to leave your party are just deleted from the game world and you don't ever get to see them again. This is also true if you verbally dismiss them. You can't tell them to go to a base or anything. You just say, "Go away, I never want to see you again," and they're gone. I suppose losing out on companions isn't a big deal though, considering that half of them are unpleasant, while the other half are bland and somewhat forgettable. Kira is constantly in a foul mood and incredibly bitchy about everything.
I'll let the trollop live. That way all the boys can use her as their personal bucket.
While Johnny is a foul-mouthed asshole who loves making crude comments.
We better make our move quick or they're gonna our asses in our sleep. That'll be on you, shithead. One of these fat gets up my I'm gonna wipe on your pillow. Then you. Got it?
Ben's detached demeanor, coupled with his inability to grasp simple concepts like electricity, can get very agitating as well. The worst part, though, is that none of these companions were programmed with enough dialogue. Since they only have a handful of lines, they will frequently say the same things over and over in combat, and it gets annoying fast.
Retreat or die in a pool of your own filth. Retreat or die in a pool of your own filth. Please retreat or die in a pool of your own filth.
By some metrics, a player who recruits all these companions could end up having a worse experience than if they had just gone solo. Anyway, you recruit your team and you escape the vault. Once outside, you are introduced to a member of the Raider Alliance, one of the two major factions in this wasteland. They take off in a few Enclave vertebrates they've stolen, and you're left on your own. The vault is still exploding though, so you need to get to a safe distance before you get caught in the detonation. After that, it's time to go to a safe house and recover from the events that just transpired. Overall, it's a very thrilling conclusion to the Vault 18 section. Even though every player's story will converge at this point, the journeys that they take to get there will be different depending on, again, all the things they've done. Now, before talking about the main faction quest lines, let's discuss the side quests you can complete. There aren't any. Well, that's not true. There are a few small towns dotted around that have a quest here and there, but unfortunately the world was never properly populated with things to do outside the main quest lines. Here's everything I could find. Buried treasure. There are some antique strongboxes to find out there in the world, and if you solve their riddle, you'll get the loot that's inside. Usually a one-time use consumable. Cash is king. It's a fetch quest to grab some corn. The corn itself is pretty cool, as it can be used like a weapon, but yeah, retrieve a few ears of corn and get paid. She's lost my money. This is a quest to retrieve some stolen money from a bank that got robbed. I never actually did this quest, because it requires you to put money in the NCR's bank, and every 5 days there's a small chance that your money will get stolen, and then you'll have to go out and track it down to get it back. But it's typically not going to take 5 days to beat this mod, so I don't think very many players even found this quest. Crawling in the sand. Defend a wrecked sand crawler from a raider attack. Alternatively, the quest Carry On has you on the attacking side with the raiders. Self-explanatory really, a simple diversion and a little fun. Saving Old Glory. Track down 3 missing caravans. Spoiler alert, they were all attacked by raiders and there's not much left of them. Just bring back the Brahmin and you'll get a cash reward. There's a fixer for that. A time-sensitive quest to track down some medicine for one of your teammates before they die. And finally, Murder Most Foul, which is a really good side quest actually. The premise is that humans are being murdered in a local ghoul town, and it's up to you to track down the culprit. This quest can only be started with a perception of 7 and a medicine check of 40, which is kinda lame. Wish you had a few more options for low-level characters. Once you have the bare minimum to start this quest, there are a few more skill checks that you will need to pass to get access to the basement, where you will unravel more of the mystery. And when you finally confront the serial killer, there are a lot of different ways to resolve that confrontation. Obviously, gunning them down is a viable option, even if it has a negative effect on the town itself. But you can also convince them to stop, convince them to turn themselves in, and a few other ways to resolve this. So yeah, thumbs up for this quest. It's actually very well done. But yeah, that was all the quests I could find while wandering around the world. It's a pretty small list, sadly, but I will take what I can get. There were a few more things in the world, some unmarked quests, some environmental storytelling as well. At one point, I stumbled upon somebody's secret underground bunker that they had put their life savings into, and they had left a bunch of notes about how their wife was not happy with how he had been spending his money. It was a pretty fun thing to find. Let's continue on to the main quest lines. And it's at this point that I would like to introduce you all to a flowchart I made to demonstrate how everything is laid out for this game. As we have already discussed, jock players and nerd players have quite different experiences in the vault, with the story converging at the end of the day. It then branches out again, allowing you to complete the vault section in one of two ways, siding with the Enclave or against them before the story reconverges again when you escape. Which brings us to where we are right now, where the story once again diverges and allows you to choose from two different factions. If you make your way to the Raider headquarters, you'll begin doing quests for the Raider Alliance, while heading towards Union City will put you on the NCR quest line. Once you've completed all the quests possible for the faction of your choosing, you will be given one final mission to defeat the Enclave. Although if you sided with the Enclave back in the vault, and have kept in contact with them, you will have access to a different final mission wherein you assist them instead. There are a few other events that can happen along the way, such as pissing off both the NCR and Raiders, or joining the Super Mutants, which results in a non-standard ending, or completing the Revanchist side quest, which results in a unified ending between the two major factions. But as you can see, no quest in this game is mandatory. There's always an alternative path. Let's discuss the NCR campaign first, which can be broken down into 5 main missions. The first one is started by encountering a desert ranger near the I-15 bridge. After defending her from a raider attack, you're tasked with killing a raider commander, which can either be done by shooting your way up the highway, or by using your science skill to reprogram a nearby missile system to skip the battle entirely. After this mission is complete, you head to Union City and introduce yourself to General Silverman, who will be the faction leader for the NCR. Something that I like to mention here about New California in general is that a lot of the important characters you'll meet, like the good general here, have a lot to say dependent on your character build, previous actions, and what you choose to say to them. A nerd character will have unique perks and open new dialogue, as do jock characters. Additionally, helping the Enclave attack the vault opens new conversation topics, and a player with high perception will be able to identify when people are lying or manipulating them. There are agility checks here and there that allow you to quick draw shoot somebody mid-conversation, and players with high luck can watch hostile characters get struck by lightning. If you've recruited Alpha, the giant killbot, you can end conversation and have him lay waste to your enemies. It really allows each player to have a relatively unique experience, even if they generally take a similar path down the relatively linear questline. Anyway, provided you don't agitate General Silverman, and assuming you survive a quick raider assault, you are given the NCR's second quest, Restore Power to the City. You can do this in 2 different ways. The first is to enlist the help of a local inventor, although you have to be wary. If you lack the skills or make the wrong choices, you might piss him off and get turned away. If that happens, or if you don't want to talk to the inventor, the second way to get power back to the city is to walk over to a defunct power station nearby, defeat a horde of infected tribals, and flip the switch at the relay station. This method also introduces Kiva, a member of a raider clan called the She. This person will give you an optional objective, and if you choose to accept it, you will be able to forge an uneasy peace between the NCR and the raiders before the end of the game. Once you've restored power, The third quest for the NCR is to head to the tribal town of Ziabula and restore the flow of clean drinking water. There are 3 ways to complete this task. With enough repair and science skill, you can activate a hologram that will fix the problems for you. If you lack the skills, but are on good terms with the inventor from the previous quest, he will activate the hologram for you. And if all else fails, you can manually carry 90 jugs of water back to Union City, and that will suffice as a temporary solution. I hope it doesn't come to that though, because each jug weighs 15 pounds, and if you don't have any companions, you're going to be doing a lot of fast traveling. And may God have mercy on you if you're playing on hardcore and fast travel is disabled. Hope you like brown, cause you'll be seeing a lot of brown. The fourth quest requires you to investigate Fort Daggerpoint, a pre-war military installation rumored to house some powerful technology that the NCR is looking to use. Something that's never explicitly mentioned as an option is that you can recruit a group of mercenaries at the saloon in town. They'll only join you for a single mission, but considering how much combat you'll see at the fort, they might be worth the asking price, especially if you're lacking companions. You might also have the ability to recruit the mercenary Anai Oran and her bodyguard, although in my experience, she is very reluctant to join most players. Once you've grabbed everyone you can, it's time to head out to the fort. You'll encounter some resistance on the way in, and you'll have to fight through some automated defenses inside. Eventually, the NCR captain that's accompanying you will instruct you to inspect a side area. You can refuse and kill him instead, but complying with his request is mandatory if you want to stay on friendly terms with the NCR. The side area he sends you down turns out to contain a very talkative super mutant. And like with General Silverman, talking to this super mutant can play out quite differently, depending on your character build and the various special checks you can pass. However the discussion goes, it always ends with him either turning hostile or escorting you to the Fort Daggerpoint bunker. If you agree to go with him, you'll get a sneak peek at some of the really cheesy writing and nonsensical plot twists from the endgame, as well as the chance to earn the non-standard super mutant ending. But if he instead turns hostile, swarms of mutants will bear down and begin to overwhelm you, forcing you to flee back the way you came. After reconvening with the NCR captain and his men, you all retreat for your lives as hundreds of mutants are released out into the world. Depending on how you've been interacting with him, he might choose to heroically sacrifice himself to ensure your survival. If he does this, there are some special checks to convince him to come with you, otherwise he dies and won't be present for the rest of the NCR campaign. Upon returning to Union City and informing General Silverman of what you've just seen, he will decide that killing Elsdragon, the leader of the Raider faction, is your 5th mission. The simplest way to do this would be a direct head-on assault on the Raider headquarters, killing waves upon waves of Raiders to reach the man. However, it might be easier to entice him out of hiding by kidnapping his daughter. If you choose to do this, the kidnapping part is easy enough. A few fairly low skill checks are required, but it's easily done. After luring Elsdragon into the open, the exchange has quite a few ways to play out, but almost always ends with Elsdragon dead. But hilariously, there's also the chance that he could get the upper hand in the negotiations and escape with his daughter, rendering your kidnapping attempt a complete waste of time and requiring you to go assault the Raider stronghold anyway. Marvelous. You gotta appreciate when a quest gives you the opportunity to completely and utterly fail. However, if you met Kiva back during the 2nd mission and completed her optional objective, this opens a 3rd possible way to complete your new task. You can get rid of Elsdragon by rallying the Raiders to overthrow him. The way you do this is quite complex and is not guaranteed to succeed, but it will allow you to infiltrate the Raider stronghold and kill Elsdragon without having to shoot the entire place up. There are quite a few special checks that will need to be passed in order to sway public support, and a high amount of speech or a minimal amount of luck are needed to cinch the deal. So there you go, 3 possible ways to take out Elsdragon. Go in guns a-blazing, lure him out of hiding and kill him, or sneak in and depose him. Once you eliminate Elsdragon, you head back to Union City. There's a quick power struggle that needs to be resolved. You see, while you've been reporting to General Silverman, there's also been a greasy senator working behind his back. He wants to take command of the army and get rid of Silverman. So now you have to choose. Do you keep working with General Silverman, or do you stab him in the back and work with the greasy senator? Side with one and kill the other. Your choice here won't change the final mission, but it will change who you are reporting to and what ending you get at the end. And with all of that resolved, it's time to begin the final mission. Return to Fort Daggerpoint and defeat the super mutants and Enclave for good. Because the Enclave are there now as well. And you gotta stop them from launching their nuclear arsenal. It's going to be a tough fight, as the defenses of the base are now on high alert, and the mutants that were swarming the place, they're still there, and now they're heavily armed. The NCR will send a few generic soldiers to assist in the assault, but there are a number of other characters that could be willing to follow you into this bloodbath. Again, this is largely influenced by the decisions you've made and the allies you've talked to. You gather your team and punch your way deep into the enemy base, where you confront the Father, a uniquely grotesque abomination of a super mutant. And it is at this point that he reveals to you your true origin story. You aren't just a kid from Vault 18. No, what you are is way more ridiculous and convoluted. To summarize it as simply as I can, you are a genetic clone of the protagonist from Fallout 1. The reason you don't die from lethal attacks is because you have a parasite inside you that gives you special regeneration abilities. And the parasite inside you is also key to the continuation of the super mutant lineage, as it allows you to reproduce via budding or something. Whatever. As long as the mutants can incorporate your body into their biomass, they'll no longer be sterile. After he tells you all this, you now have to fight the Father and his minions, although he can be talked down if you've got a high enough charisma. With the mutant threat dealt with, it's time to confront the final enemy, the Enclave. But before you do that, you encounter the mercenary Anai Oran, who has a few more ridiculous plot twists to throw at you. She's the daughter of a pre-war senator and a mutant who is over 200 years old. She also has that regenerative parasite in her body. Also, her bodyguard is her clone. And also, the two Enclave soldiers you're gonna go fight, Chevy and Bragg, they're also her clone. Everybody's clones now. Everybody is clones now. Everybody has parasites in them. Anyway, it's time to deal with the final bosses. After killing your way through some Enclave soldiers, you are ambushed by Chevy. There's no way to talk her down. You absolutely do have to fight her. Although, I feel like there should be a way to point out the logical inconsistencies at play here. She says she wants to purge the wasteland of mutants and mutations, despite the fact that she herself is explicitly a mutant. You'll then have to confront Colonel Bragg, although he can be talked into standing down with the correct skill checks. Once all this combat is over, you get to decide what to do with the nuclear payload they had. You can use it against your foes, or save it as a nuclear deterrent. After you've made your choice, the final cutscene plays. It will be different depending on a few factors, such as if you aligned with the corrupt senator or General Silverman, and what you decided to do with those nuclear missiles, that's important too, but most events will play out in a similar way. The local tribes are pacified, the NCR ends up controlling the region, and the player character detonates a nuke in Hopeville before becoming a courier and being ambushed by a man in a checkered suit. That's right, Fallout New California isn't just a prequel to the events of New Vegas, it's also the courier's unofficial origin story. According to this mod, the protagonist of Fallout New Vegas is a genetically engineered clone of the protagonist of Fallout 1, who also has a regenerative parasite in their body that gives them superhuman abilities, which is the real reason why they were able to survive getting shot in the head in the game's opening cutscene. And in my opinion, this is the biggest detractor for Fallout New California. If the writing did not abruptly nosedive so hard near the end, this mod might have become the most well-known fan creation for New Vegas. Many of the mod's flaws could theoretically be improved upon, such as the sparse overworld being populated, its glitches being fixed, its underdeveloped companions being fleshed out, But the sudden drop in narrative quality that is baked into the end and alluded to multiple times throughout the campaign, it becomes the thing that ends up overshadowing the whole experience. It makes me wonder how many players were put off from a second playthrough simply because of how bad the writing got near the end. Still, there is something to be said about being able to import your New California character into New Vegas to serve as one continuous story. It does end up causing some balancing issues. Overall, I would say that the NCR questline was an enjoyable time. It may not have been terribly long, but most of the quests had multiple ways to resolve them, and we got to meet some fun and interesting characters along the way. The voice actor for General Silverman was great, even when they weren't given the greatest of dialogue.
War never changes, kid. Come on, let's get a move on.
I'd say all the voice actors did great, although I wasn't a big fan of Kiva's dialogue being entirely in Japanese. Not only is it a bit jarring and doesn't make much sense, but I hate being forced to turn on subtitles to understand what someone's saying. And while I do like having the ability to depose General Silverman, I'm not too keen on the corrupt senator being his replacement. The way he's presented makes him seem almost comically evil, which means that most players who join the NCR questline probably won't be interested in his snide, condescending personality, or his attempts to backstab the much more affable general.
Get out there and make your decision. Turn on us and you and your friends will die in the street along with him.
The deals that he's offering would be more enticing if he weren't written as such a contemptible character. But again, I'm really happy that there are multiple ways to resolve most quests, and I appreciate how conversations with major characters are shaped by your character build and your past choices. Even though the NCR questline is mostly linear, the possible branches and variations within means that not everybody's journey will be the same. With the NCR questline complete, let's take a look at the other major faction you can side with, the Raider Alliance. Because even though most players will end up siding with the NCR, you're also freely able to align with the Raider faction instead. Most of their quests run parallel to the NCR's, sometimes they're in direct opposition, but sometimes you'll be doing the exact same mission, but with a few minor tweaks. To ally with the Raiders and begin their questline, simply head to their stronghold and join up. Alternatively, you might find yourself captured by Raiders and brought to their stronghold against your will. Regardless of how you get there, the Raider leader Elsdragon will instruct you to complete their initiation ritual to prove your worth. He wants you to kill a super mutant behemoth down in the slave caves. This task can be made easier in a couple different ways. With enough intelligence, you can convince Elsdragon to give you back all your gear. A combination of charisma and speech will allow you to rally the slaves to fight alongside you. And if your charisma is exceptionally high, you can convince another super mutant to fight by your side. There's a crafting table and a bunch of ingredients to make bombs if you've got a high enough explosives skill. And with a combination of sneak and science, the behemoth can be killed instantly with a nearby mining laser. It's actually kind of amazing how many different ways there are to complete this quest. And once it's done, you are given permission to roam around the Raider camp at your discretion. Before starting the next mission in the Raider questline, it's important to note that any companions that you had with you have been captured, and any robot companions you have been broken. You can repair the robots once you have enough science and repair skill, but there's not much you can do about your human companions. Most of them are going to be sold into slavery, and there's not many ways to avoid that. But there is an optional and somewhat hidden side quest to free them. However, completing this optional quest will make you an enemy of the Raider faction. If you want to stick with the Raiders and complete their questline, you'll need to accept the fact that most of your teammates won't be able to join you. They're all getting sold into slavery, which is a little disappointing if you went through a lot of trouble to get them. If you do decide to stick with the Raiders, your next task is to attack the NCR stationed at the I-15 bridge. Basically, it's the same skirmish as the one from the NCR questline, you're just killing the NCR instead of the Raiders this time. There's only one way to beat this quest, and that's by killing the named Ranger and named NCR Captain. Once that's done, the next quest is to secure a reliable source of electricity for the Raiders. Basically, it's the exact same mission you do for the NCR, but there's no option to talk to the inventor this time. He is in NCR territory, so the only way forward this time is to go to the relay station, meet Kiva, defend the location from attackers, and flip the switch. The next mission is to visit the tribals of Ziabula, just like you do for the NCR. Only this time, instead of securing a source of fresh drinking water, you are going there to kill the chieftain for daring to work with the NCR. Your mission is to bring his severed head back to Elsdragon as proof. This part is fairly simple, but also kind of cool because you have a few different options. Walking in and murdering everyone is a valid choice, of course, but you can also spare the chieftain's life if you are able to obtain a similar looking head to use as a substitute. The chieftain has a deceased brother who looks similar to him, and if you're persuasive enough, you can just take his brother's head instead. If you're exceptionally persuasive, you can convince him to kill his own son, and apparently his son looks similar enough, and Elsdragon won't be able to tell the difference. You can also pressure him into surrendering his people to the Raider Alliance, allowing you to enslave his entire tribe. Obviously, Elsdragon will be very happy about this. So yeah, quite a few different ways to complete this quest, which is nice. The next objective is to go to Fort Daggerpoint and secure the weapons contained within. Again, this quest is basically a carbon copy of its NCR counterpart, except you'll be accompanied by a Raider companion instead of an NCR one. After once again unleashing the horde of super mutants, you return to the Raider base. And much like in the NCR questline, if you've made friends with Kiva, you have the option of overthrowing Elsdragon, which gives her greater control over the Raider tribes and alters the ending you receive in the end. Regardless of who you side with, the next mission is to defend some Raider settlements from the mutant attackers, as well as neutralizing the NCR's leadership. Defending the settlements is simple enough. Grab the nuke launcher nearby and start blowing up mutants at each location. You have a few more options when dealing with the NCR though, as passing a few skill checks will give you the option to talk them down, or have them join you, or surrender to you. Whatever option you choose, it's time to return to the Raider headquarters and prepare for the final mission. We'll be attacking the Enclave and mutants at Fort Daggerpoint, same as with the NCR questline. Again, this mission plays out in an identical fashion, the only difference being that you'll have Raider forces backing you up instead of NCR. Assault the base, deal with the mutant leader, deal with the Enclave, decide what to do with the missile, and finally, talk to the Raider leader you've chosen to side with. So yeah, the Raider campaign doesn't stray too far from the NCR questline, with a few of its missions essentially just being copy-paste jobs. As a result, a lot of the praises and criticisms I have for one campaign transfer over to the other. I enjoyed the majority of voice acting, even when what's being said is silly or nonsensical. The gameplay is still good, although there are fewer ways to resolve some of these quests compared to the NCR ones. Most players are going to end up doing an NCR run the first time they play this mod, but there is enough new stuff in the Raider questline to keep things interesting if they decide they want to try it next. Unfortunately, given how similar these questlines are, you'll be spending a fair amount of time doing some of the same quests as before. Now, there is a third major faction you can ally with, the Enclave. Unfortunately, they don't have a questline of their own outside of the Vault. If you sided with them back in Vault 18, Coach Bragg will call you on your Pip-Boy every once in a while just to check in.
Come in, soldier. I have mission-specific updates critical to your success. Come back.
He'll command you to ally with the NCR or the Raiders and gain their trust. This opens up a few extra bits of dialogue with various characters, but largely means you'll be doing the same campaign yet again. Once you're almost done with either of these campaigns and are prepping for the final mission, you will be allowed to ditch them and rejoin the Enclave at Fort Daggerpoint, which enables different dialogue with the mutants, as well as changing the final boss fight. Instead of fighting Chevy and Colonel Bragg, you'll be fighting alongside them against the mercenary Anayo Ran and her bodyguard. Once they're dead, you watch the final cinematic play out and the credits roll. So yeah, I wouldn't consider the Enclave to truly have their own campaign. If you've already done an NCR run and a Raider Alliance run, doing an Enclave run isn't going to be a very new experience. As always, I will say that I enjoyed the voice acting. Colonel Bragg in particular has a really stellar performance.
We're gonna get this country back in check. We'll wipe it clean and clear of aberrants, then get Old Glory waving above this nation again.
And it was awesome to see a new final boss who had a pretty cool bestial form. So those are all the possible factions you can align yourself with. But there's also a Wildcard Anarchy ending that you can get. Upon killing the leaders of both the NCR and Raider Alliance, you are given the opportunity to skip straight to the final mission, assaulting Fort Daggerpoint. If you're still on good terms with the Enclave, you can still align with them, otherwise you'll take them out. And that's all the different paths for Fallout New California. There are several different ending cinematics, each one ties into vanilla New Vegas, allowing you to start the base game with your imported character and all their stats. As much as I've praised this game for its branching pathways, the old adage about the journey being more important than the destination holds true here. Given how much emphasis is placed on player agency and your choices having consequences, it's a real shame how everything is forced to converge at the end of the day. Although there are over a dozen possible endings, it largely amounts to flavor text over the one singular ending. The NCR takes control of the region, the Raiders disband, and you become the courier and get shot in the head. The decision to always tie your ending into the story of New Vegas means that no matter your choices, you always end up back in the town of Goodsprings, even if it makes no sense. At the end of the day, there's no denying that Fallout New California has quite a few big flaws. The lack of side quests, the lore breaks, the obnoxious and underutilized companions, and the forced tie-in with the courier all drag the overall experience down. But it's still a good bit of fun. I enjoy learning about how other people played through this and how their journey differed from my own. It's interesting to see which companions they were able to bring, how they reacted to the Raider ambush, and how they chose to resolve the quests that had multiple possible resolutions. I've been meticulously combing over this game for the last 9 months, playing different scenarios, watching other people play, reading the Wikia pages, and sifting through the development documents. I've tried to show off everything I could, but there's just so much buried here that I am constantly finding more. So many good moments deep within this game that most players will just never see. If the development team had more time and resources to fully realize this mod, I think more people would have been able to see how much effort went into it and been able to appreciate it more. But the development of New California is ultimately one of overambition. The desire to make a Fallout that matches the high standard for quality set by New Vegas without having the resources to do so, unfortunately. The original plans had to continuously be scaled back just to be able to release a finished product. Things like a full-on Super Mutant campaign, more side quests, and more survivors from the Vault were all in the plans, but ended up on the cutting room floor. For example, when the father and his underling tell you that you were a clone of the Vault Dweller who defeated the Master, that's not actually true, according to the developers. You aren't actually a clone of the protagonist from Fallout 1, the father simply thinks you are, and has no actual evidence to support his claim. And there was originally supposed to be a way to discover this information and present it to him, which would have convinced him that his plans were flawed and that he should stand down. This would have been reminiscent of the highly praised method in which you can defeat the Master back in Fallout 1, which is a tough fight that can ultimately be avoided if you'd taken the time to explore the world and thoroughly scouted for information that can assist you. But because all of this was added to the pile of cut content, most players never realized that it was misinformation. The only remaining evidence in-game is an unmarked terminal in the Father's lair, containing a journal entry by one of his minions. So what should have been a callback to one of the best moments in the Fallout series instead became a lightning rod of mockery for those who experienced it. When the first version of this game was released, players did not pull their punches with their criticisms. They expressed their disappointment with certain design choices and openly lamented features that weren't present. And so, the development team set out on an ambitious remastering of the content. Players wanted more ways to complete quests outside of direct combat, so plans were drawn up to add indirect, non-combat solutions to every quest. Players lamented the lack of Enclave content, so plans were drafted for more Enclave stuff to do. Players complained about the boring, annoying, and edgy companions, so each one was slated for a complete overhaul. New backstories, new appearances, new personalities, everything. Beyond them, more side quests, more options for already existing side quests, companion loyalty quests, and also fix the bugs that were present in the initial release, fix the performance issues, replace nav meshes, correct AI pathing, and so on and so on. And to be fair, some of these did end up in the version we have today. Many of the technical issues were fixed, a few side quests were added like the puzzle boxes and the sand crawler, and some of the alternate solutions were added, such as avoiding combat at the I-15 bridge by using a computer to activate a missile system to kill the raiders. But of all the things that the team wanted to add, only about 5% actually made it in. For example, the companion Jimmie was planned to be completely overhauled. No longer a blank slate, she would have been rewritten as an Enclave-aligned companion that would have given much-needed depth to the faction. She would have been romanceable and upgradable and had more side quests and a new name, but in the end, the only thing that ever really changed about her was her character model. So it went for nearly all of the planned revisions. Ambitious ideas, constricted by limited resources. The unfinished rework, much like the unrealized initial version, highlights the difficulties in creating a large-scale project sustained only by volunteers and their passion. And so, here we are. Development on Fallout New California has ended. The final release will forever have its flaws. It will never be perfect. But that's okay, because Fallout New California is good enough. It's a solid few hours of entertainment for players who seek more of that classic Fallout role-playing experience. There's definitely plenty of fun to be had here. As long as you don't take it too seriously, you can have a great time. At the end of the day, Fallout New California is not just a story about a parasite-infested vault dweller who goes on to become the courier of the Mojave. It's also a story about a handful of people who enjoyed a 2010 role-playing video game so much that they were inspired to try telling one of their own. Amateurs and non-amateurs pooled their talent together for nearly a decade, each contributing what time and energy they could to breathe life into the project. Each of them poured their soul into it to make it as good as it could possibly be, even if that meant recording dialogue in the back of a hot shed with mattresses propped against the wall to dampen the sound.
Now is your time. You get out there and show that you have the character it takes to bring America back to glory. Can I get a hurrah? Damn right. Now move out.
It's important to remember that behind every mod is a team of talented programmers, artists, and actors whose only goal is to make something for us all to enjoy. And it's always a treat to see what they can make, what inventive things they can do, and the new stories they want to tell. I look forward to exploring a few more of those stories in the future. Thank you for watching.
You launched the missiles? You idiot! That was our only way to manipulate the NCR into capitulation. Without it, we'll be hung out for the vultures to pick our bones. I don't believe this. We're supposed to be riding on a wave of perfect euphoria, but we're gonna be executed for treason! Oh, help me! I think I'm having a stroke!